Tonight's a special bulletin episode. We're celebrating my son's 15th birthday, and I wanted to make sure I was with my family. You know how it is. Child only turns 15 once. So instead of a full episode, it's going to be short, sharp, and factual, and completely worth your time. The news doesn't stop, and I wanted to be sure that I was still putting some things on your radar. All right. And right now, airports are straining. DHS is still caught in a political chokehold. Trump is still trying to hold Homeland Security funding hostage with the SAVE Act, his voter suppression bill. And his Iran story keeps changing. The market keeps reacting to those changes, and the public is finally starting to punish him for it. All right. Welcome to Quiet Loud. I'm DeAnthony Collins, and like I said, tonight is a special bulletins episode. So let's get into why the DHS is still jammed up. Is getting harder and harder to ignore. More major airports are seeing extraordinary lines and wait times as TSA officers quit and call out during this DHS shutdown. With nearly 500 TSA officers having resigned since mid-February and absenteeism topping 10%. To patch these holes, ICE and Homeland Security investigations officers are now being diverted to help at 14 airports. Now, here's the contradiction. Because, first of all, when Trump stated or declared or whatever it is, truths or whatever it is that he does, talking about ICE going into the airports, it sounded more like a threat than an offer. Right. And like I said, the real contradiction is that Democrats' proposed reform demands in the DHS talks included taking those masks off and body cameras being worn and tighter warrant rules and more accountability for ICE and CBP. Now, Republicans have treated the unmasking demand as a complete non-starter, arguing safety for their agents. But if ICE agents can now operate in America's airports in front of the traveling public, the argument against unmasking and accountability gets weaker, not stronger. They're out there. So the real question is not whether Republicans believe ICE can be unmasked in public places, because they plainly do. The question is why that unmasking becomes unacceptable only when it comes with oversight. We want to see what they're doing. We want to hold them accountable. We want to talk about how they are comporting themselves out here on our city streets. Then it becomes a problem. And this matters when the government starts improvising airport security with reassigned immigration agents while still refusing basic accountability standards. This is not strength. This is a major strain on our airport system. Not to mention that, there have been several reports that they're not just helping with the expediency of the lines, that they are doing some enforcement there. But we'll have more on that to come. All right. Republicans, including Senator John Kennedy, have been discussing a dastardly two-step plan. First, they want to pass a bipartisan bill to fund most of DHS, which I think is good. That's admirable. Let's get TSA going again. Let's get these people paid. They've been at least one paycheck in the hole right now. All right. But then on the other side of that, they want to then try to move the ICE and border money later through a reconciliation bill where they only need 50+1. Okay, with that simple majority. So they're still going to try to push for all the stuff that we hate, all the stuff that Democrats are pushing back on. They're still going to try to do that anyway when they don't have to meet the 60 vote threshold. But like I said, these people need to be paid. They're doing these jobs and they clearly need to be paid. And I agree that something needs to be done about that. But separate reporting this week also showed active talks around funding most of DHS while carving out at least parts of that ICE enforcement that I talked about before. But then guess what? Trump stepped in. Okay. And Trump told Republicans not to accept the DHS funding deal unless Democrats also approved the SAVE Act. That's his proof of citizenship voter bill. In other words, even with the way the airports are rolling right now and TSA workers missing paychecks, he tried to turn Homeland Security funding into leverage for a voting restriction fight that doesn't have the 60 votes in the Senate. That's the real story. Solvable funding problem was made harder because Trump wanted to step in and have his say. Think about that. Now, anyway, let's stay on this SAVE Act because this thing is dangerous, okay? Everybody's talking about they're trying to get rid of voter fraud. The accounts of voter fraud across our, electorate's history is minuscule. And you'll find that most of the perpetrators have been Republicans. But anyway, the Brennan Center says that the SAVE Act will require Americans to produce documents like a passport or a birth certificate to register or re-register to vote, and that more than 21 million voting age citizens don't readily have access to these kinds of documents. So the Brennan Center also notes that earlier versions of this bill failed before a Senate vote amid broad opposition, okay? Republicans and Democrats alike. And the newer version has passed the House in February, but it's still not cleared the Senate yet. This is a really unpopular bill. Okay, it is going to disenfranchise not only a bunch of Democrats and low-income folks, but it's going to, they said 21 million. That's not just Democrats, guys. That's anybody who can't get a hold of their birth certificate or who had a name change at some point during their lives. And so the bill is facing long odds in the Senate because Republicans don't have, like I said, they don't have the 60 votes. And critics argue that it would burden eligible voters rather than solve whatever fraud crisis that they're talking about here. So Brendan's analysis also adds that people whose current names don't neatly match their older documents could be hit especially hard, including many married women. Okay. People change their name for a whole variety of reasons. And sometimes people come to find out that the name they've been going by has not been their legal name all this time. So it's not just Democrats who are going to be affected by this. It's going to be some of everybody. So people really need to step up and push back on this, because while the Campaign Legal Center has warned about the pressure and legal exposure it could put up on election officials. So yeah, Sure Papers is a fair description of this burden, because the burden is the point. They want to be able to keep you from voting. The SAVE Act is so unpopular because it asks millions of legal voters to once again prove themselves. And it's dangerous because it tries to turn that access to the ballot into a paperwork obstacle course. Okay? This is nothing but a modern day poll tax. Keep that in mind. So the Senate has confirmed Markwayne Mullin as the new Homeland Security Secretary after the ouster of, I'm forgetting her name already, Kristi Noem. Great, I want to forget her name. And it was, guess you could call it bipartisan margin, because the Democratic Senator John Fetterman helped cast a confirming vote to get him through. So that means that the Senate found time to bring in a new secretary before it found time to fix the funding crisis for the department itself. So what is he coming in to run? What is he coming in to do? It's completely at a stall, and he has no new, fresh ideas. Have you heard Markwayne Mullin speak? Okay, that's not nothing. Okay, because at the same time, TSA workers are going unpaid. Airports are backing up. We're watching people in line for hours. They're telling people to come to these airports at least 4 hours early. 4 hours early. Okay, that's ridiculous. And lawmakers are still arguing over masks and warrants and ICE operations. Washington's answer was to change the person at the top without fixing the way the machine itself works. So you can support or oppose Markwayne Mullin on the merits. He's awful. He doesn't know a thing. He probably is one of the least qualified senators I think I've ever seen or heard of. And we just need to fix the issues that are happening inside of DHS before putting some new numbskull in the position. Confirming a new official is not the same thing as restoring function. And governments that confuse the two usually stay broken a lot longer because they're not fixing any issues. You're just putting a new figurehead at the top that's going to come out and play to an audience of one. And that audience of one is particularly unpopular himself right now. Trump's approval rating is down to 36%, according to Reuters. And this is the lowest of his term, while his approval on the economy is even lower at 29%, and on the cost of living is 25%. Didn't he run on the economy? Both times? People said that they voted for him because of his economic policies, whatever those were. Okay? The weakest readings Reuters has reported for either of his presidential terms. These have been. But it's also found broad public concern about the Iran war and a clear hit to household confidence as gas prices continue to rise. And the reporting shows why. Trump's public messaging on Iran has repeatedly shifted. He came out swinging, talking about we had already won this thing. So he's coming out with victory language. He's talking about negotiating with them when they're coming out saying no such thing is happening. Then he comes out with this language of escalation only to back down when those terms have not been met. And all the while, the stock markets and the oil prices have swung around just listening to those statements. Oil plunged right after Trump claimed he was having those talks with Iran, and then they rebounded after Iran came out and denied his version of the events. So that's enough to say that he's coming out specifically to make these claims so that he can give a boost to the market. Most people would call that market manipulation. I hope that's something that they really play a close eye on as he moves further through his lame duck and after the Trump era. And as to the ground war concern, reporting today says that as many as 2,000 Fort Bragg-based 82nd Airborne paratroopers here from the state of North Carolina, where I live, have been ordered to the Middle East as the administration weighs its next moves. So it's looking especially real here in North Carolina because they're sending folks from here in our home state to be boots on the ground somewhere in Iran. It has not completely been confirmed yet. Some people are talking about they may be going in to invade Carg Island, but I guess we'll just have to see. But the political reality here is that according to this, we're talking about approval ratings and everything, and the reporting is showing that Trump's support among men 18 to 29 has fallen from 43% in early 2025 to 33% just this past February. It is an erosion that should be enough to wake up Republicans, because in Florida, just this week, a Trump-endorsed Republican state representative lost a special election to Democrat Emily Gregory. And this is particularly interesting given the fact that this race was in Florida's 87th district, which includes Mar-a-Lago, which means that Donald Trump is effectively a constituent of a Democrat that he didn't support. In fact, he threw his name behind the Republican candidate, gave his full endorsement, and we see how far that went, even in the district that includes his home. Okay, so that's really showing us what the numbers start to reflect, that approval is sliding and the message is drifting, and it's showing up in his polling. All right. So that's the bulletin for tonight. DHS is still being used as leverage. The SAVE Act is still a paperwork weapon that's aimed at lawful voters. We see that ICE is now working at the airports, while Republicans still resist the very accountability measures that they say are too much. Trump's Iran messaging is still all over the place, and the public's response is now showing up in the polls, in household stress, and at the gas pump, to the tune of at least $1 more per gallon. All right. So thanks again for letting me come in with a more abbreviated episode and celebrate my son's 15th birthday. So please, if you can, like, subscribe, comment, share, join the Quiet Quorum if you haven't. And as always, stay grounded, stay informed, and stay loud quietly. This is the Quiet Loud. Y'all take care.